without further ado, just thank you, Jackson, for being here. And if you could just quickly just introduce yourself to our community, and perhaps give us a few brands that you worked on that were some of the funnest projects you were working on.
For sure. Darius, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, we go way back for everyone. I was Darius's intern when he started one of his first companies called WeSpin, and I was a designer there. So my background is in design. I went to USC, met Darius in LA, studied design and entrepreneurship. And for a long time, I've been pretty obsessed with user experience, user interface, and actually got my start in technology and software. And then I founded an agency called Darkroom Agency with a co-founder, and we actually grew by virtue of adding growth marketing services. So we started in branding, digital experience, very design and development heavy. And in order to add and rebalance our revenue into more monthly recurring revenue, we went into marketing services. So think paid social, retention, email, and SMS. And today we do everything from customer acquisition all the way to marketplace management. So like Amazon, retail marketing, et cetera, and everything in between. So it's a lot of services that we offer. And so I've seen a lot. We work with companies that I like to call on their way to household names. So they are growing super fast. The cool kids know who they are, but they've not yet achieved that status of being truly like mainstream. And so some of the brands that we've worked with are Olipop. I'd argue now they are kind of a household name. That was one of the more fun projects we did, connected TV ads with them. It was their first foray into more like TV commercials and getting off of paid social. We did a bunch of awesome web development work with the University of North Carolina. We helped them build out a whole intranet and kind of market their business school. And then we actually work with a lot of food and CPG brands now on the Amazon side. So I'm looking at my kitchen and I can see Hella Cocktail, Saws, Gorgie, Sweet Loren's. These are all brands that are like the new Whole Foods up and coming cohort. You may have heard of some of those names, maybe not, but they're doing anywhere from $1 million to $50 million in revenue, growing quickly and trying to hack together their marketing program. So that's our sweet spot, is like figuring out how to be super efficient with marketing and gain impression share for our companies and grow top line. So I just want to say, I've been working with AI for the past year, trying to figure it out myself. I don't have all the answers. I'm not an engineer. I'm a designer. So I try to take a layman's approach. I hope I can offer some value, but I'm trying to figure it out just like everybody else. And so I'm happy to get as tactical as I can be. I feel like a lot of the AI stuff is like people love to talk about it, but then it's like, how does this actually get applied in my day-to-day other than just chatting with ChatGPT? So yeah, we can get into it all.
Before we go too deep into AI, let's start with a couple just basic definitions to frame our conversation. Yeah. For you, from your vantage point, what is a brand really? And you even mentioned Olipop, for example, that you would argue currently a household brand. What does that mean? Right? There's a lot of hype around we need to build a brand. Is it a revenue thing? Is it market size? How do you know a brand has made it? So if you can just start from the beginning, which is how you specifically define what a brand is, what brand building is, and what does it mean to have made it a household name?
Totally. So I take Marty Neumeier's definition of brand. If you guys don't know who Marty Neumeier is, look him up. He is the absolute GOAT when it comes to brand and brand strategy. But his definition is that brand is it's a person's gut feeling of a product or service or company. And that's a really important frame, because what it means is that your brand is really ultimately not up to you. It is someone's perception of your company or your product relative to your competitor set. And that's actually quite empowering, because I feel like when we talk about branding, it can be either extremely surface level. People think logo, colors, assets like that, or it can be super gray area and people don't really know how to leverage branding as a tool in their toolkit. So when we think of that definition, ultimately what that translates to is reputation. And that's actually a huge business asset ultimately once you reach a certain scale. Because at the end of the day, if you can sell a similar product as your competitor at a 25, 30% increase, that should flow directly to your bottom line. So for big companies, they look at brand as a major economic advantage to their gross margin. For smaller brands, I think it's different, and I want to talk about that. I think that branding gets way overhyped for early stage brands, and it actually slows them down and can become kind of a tar pit for them. And I know it's a little bit of a hot take because I come from brand and brand strategy world, and I've worked with a lot of startups, and I've seen a lot of people spend exorbitant amounts of money on branding firms, and clients have paid us a lot of money for branding, and looking back, I'm like, man, I don't know if that was even the smartest call. And so why do I say that? We need to just distinguish between branding versus marketing. So branding, let me just try to boil this down into as simple as I can. Branding, really, the exercise of branding should be to identify your values and who you ultimately are trying to target as far as a community and your initial customer set, and what are their values and are those aligned. The whole game of branding is to basically corral that collective perception that I spoke about, your reputation, into the way that you want it to evolve and be over time. And that just takes time. There's no other way to do it. You can't do it overnight. You're not going to launch a marketing video and create a brand that you want like that. So time is the secret element, and that's both a good and a bad thing. The good side of that is that no one really cares or remembers you. So don't get fixated on branding and polished assets and, oh, we need to look like this and adhere to these guidelines. That's where brands get really tripped up. Now, marketing is a tool within the larger umbrella under brand. So, your product, your team, your marketing, everything creates your brand. Marketing is a core pillar of that. But marketing's job is to drum up impressions. That's really what it's trying to do. It's trying to drum up impressions and bring potential customers to the point of sale. And then it's sales' job to convert those customers. And so the relationship between marketing and branding is really marketing is bringing the impressions, and then the goal of your brand strategy should be to convert those impressions into the perception that you want over time. And you do that consistently over time, again and again and again. So just to use an example, 2 examples. Everyone knows Liquid Death. A lot of people should know Bandit Running. In the case of Liquid Death, they were very smart and intentional about their brand strategy early on. They said, we are going to be the water for people who go to rock shows and are edgy and feel like there's nothing in the marketplace that really speaks to them and that they feel like cool or interesting walking around carrying. And so then it's just a marketing game. They do tons and tons of marketing and content that just reinforces that brand and that identity. And then people have that perception and they align with that identity. They say, my identity aligns with that company. I prefer to purchase from this company. And so that's branding in action over time. In the case of Bandit Running, same thing. They're like, we want to go after the Soho, West Village, cool crowd who's into running. And then they do everything that they do speaks to that community and reinforces that as the option for that customer set. And so I know I've ranted on and on about branding and marketing, but I think for early stage brands, the key takeaway is use branding as like your frame and your launch pad of like, who are we actually targeting? The more specific that we can get about that, the better. And then how do we align our authentic values and why we're creating our products with that group? And then just that's the frame of everything that you do. Product, marketing, who you hire, all of these things should just reinforce that. So at the risk of going on and on, please cut me off.
Just a quick double click on that. You were talking about Liquid Death, and there has to be a reason why. Maybe it's just the appeal of it where, you start working on the sexy, project first, which is the branding or the assets, and you get really carried away. Why do founders get carried away? I'm curious. And 2, in that case, when they were building just their marketing strategy around so that they can align with the brands, some would say they did have quite a bit of spend up front, just understanding even the agency, like building some what would be like from a branding standpoint, almost like a prototype or an MVP to go to market for an early stage, right, brand?
Yeah. First of all, let me just say I have a lot of empathy for early stage brands who don't have a lot of money. They just can't raise or just don't raise a ton of money and can hire the best branding and design firms or even just hire a designer, based in the US who can make assets for them. Let me just pick apart some of the things that you just said. So the reason I think brands get stuck in the mud, and I say maybe they shouldn't over-index on branding and brand design early on, is really when you're early on, you just want more and more shots on goal when it comes to content. Like you just need to be producing tons and tons of content to drum up those impressions. Because in order to create an actual brand, you need more impression share and you need more market share. So really, you're just trying to create that flywheel of content. And I think that a lot of founders get stuck in like every video or every post that they put out, anything that they put out to the external world, they're very protective over it and they can be perfectionists about it. And that's just it's a trap because no one's going to care what you did 2 weeks ago. As long as you're, operating with good faith, in good faith. No one's going to care what you did 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, even a couple days ago. So we just got to get more shots on goal with content. So don't get stuck in the mud there. When it comes to what the prototypical sort of brand package could be, it really depends on your product or service. I think in the case of Liquid Death, they were right to spend a little bit more time on design and like look and feel because they sell a commodity product. They're selling water. So they are selling literally the facade and the packaging around the product. It's essentially the same as Poland Spring. If you're selling, a service or something a bit more intangible or something that requires a longer consideration cycle, it's a higher price product, maybe that could be different because you can sell more of the utility of it rather than just the look and feel. And it's less of an impulse thing. So I think in that case, really what you want to do as a founder is be more upfront and in the limelight of your marketing. Because that's really what's going to set you apart. And it's going to be the cheapest thing you can do to kind of create an identity around your company. Now, there's also yes, you should create a logo. Yes, you should think about design and how it's differentiated. But the way I would just approach that is go look at all of the competitors that you're directly competing against, look at their design systems, and figure out where you can zag where everyone else is zigging or, create some differentiation so that people can identify you amongst such a crowded marketplace. And then don't spend months and months and months on that. Just make a few bets, whether it be on a color, a typography system, whatever, and just go into it. And you can always refine over time. If you notice companies that scale really fast, particularly tech companies, if you remember Notion, Figma, Dropbox, these companies did not look necessarily the way that they look today. Super polished. Everything is buttoned up according to a certain set of guidelines. In fact, it was quite ugly in the beginning, and they just had a great product that was differentiated, and they spoke to a certain type of customer. And then 5-10 years into their life cycle as a company, they did a big, not rebrand, but redesign and kind of clean everything up. So I would just say compartmentalize that aspect, push it off a little bit, and focus on just speaking to customers, the right customers, and then getting more and more shots on goal.
Yeah, for sure. So, very often founders do get distracted, forgetting it really is keeping it simple. And initially, you creating value, everything's sort of tied back to the pillar of creating value and validating that your value, even before brand marketing, all of that, is actually resonating with your core audience. And then you can go and capture it. And so there's so much groundwork that needs to be done in terms of 0 to 1, and even some of us are earlier phase than 0, right? And just making sure that the value is at least reaching to some sort of critical mass before all those things really become an accelerant, right? Or an amplifier to your core value in that sense. We're about to dive further into some of the playbooks and also understanding the role of AI. But just in simple terms, I've heard this before. As you grow, how can a brand be some sort of a moat or defensive mechanism for a startup?
I don't think it can be a moat. I mean, in that sense of the word, it's not a moat. A moat to me is something that you can defend for a long time, and it can actually withstand some degradation before it really starts to truly affect market share on a large scale. And let me just give an example of really what I mean by that. If you look at the luxury fashion houses, it's probably the best example of brand, like true brand equity. They have to put out products every year in order to stay relevant as fashion brands. If you think about like Gucci, over the past 3 years, they've completely fallen off. They were one of the hottest brands 10 years ago. Past 3 to 5 years, they've completely fallen off. But that brand name Gucci has so much equity that they can withstand maybe 5 to 10 years of not being the it brand in the zeitgeist, maybe even longer, honestly. People will still pay premium prices for their products. And so that is the power of brand, and I would say that's an actual moat for that type of company. But for an early stage brand, let's just be honest, brand is just not a moat. You're just too young in the game. Not enough people know who you are. Not enough people care. People are busy. And so that's I know Liquid Death's almost cliche at this point, but they've just done such a good job of like being they're like a media company. And they just put out hit after hit of entertainment, and that keeps them top of mind. That keeps them fresh. And when people go to actually purchase, they'll remember that brand and hopefully convert.
Yeah. So, am I right to say that if I remember correctly, Liquid Death founders were agency people, like storytellers, if I remember correctly, which actually ties into the core strength of like, yes, even the brand and the founder, like how that, is in lockstep, like on brand, so to speak, and they're staying to their core competency as well. Let's move on a little bit.
Hold on, can I just say one thing on that? Yeah. So I don't want to be misunderstood, right? So I think that it's just an important distinction. People get way too hung up on this concept of brand. So that's why I just wanted to be a bit bold and just say it's not a moat. The thing that you're watching there is marketing. That's what it is. And it's just using brand and this concept of like, where do we want this brand to be in 10 years? And what are the things that we need, the inputs that we need to compound over time in order to get there? And so it's very intentional. They take their, any company that's doing this properly is definitely taking it seriously, but they realize that they don't have a real brand moat or true brand equity. And so they're much more focused on velocity and being flexible and dynamic with how they create content. That's just really what I want to get across. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, with AI, part of the promise is that you can accelerate and be able to have that sort of scale, even for a solo founder, for smaller teams, and some of the more like AI-powered solutions, workflows, all of that, right? But I think even the true understanding, big picture, what some of the, I would say, like best practices, even pre-AI, right, that you, from your perspective, are like must-haves to set the foundation for more of an AI future, like powering workflows and stuff like that. What are some of your fundamentals?
Okay, so I think this may answer your question, but here's how kind of I think about marketing, frequent marketing, on a tight cadence in a way that resonates with a core customer set. First of all, you just have to entrench yourself in the culture, the subculture that you are marketing to across the most relevant platforms that subculture engages on. And I'm just talking about, Instagram, X, LinkedIn, wherever it may be. There's probably a couple channels that you can focus on, and you just need to get to know who are the influencers in this space, what are the trends happening in this space. They come and go weekly. What are people talking about? Where's the general sentiment of this community and this market? Like, entrench yourself in it and become an active participant in it. That's going to be the best way to gain impressions and it's the best way to create content that's going to land and gain impressions that are going to be high quality. And so that's how I think about the general framework. You pre-AI, you just got to do that work. I would say even today, you got to do that work. You have to be a listener, an observer, spend a lot of time watching what your potential customers are talking about and doing, and really going deep to understand them. And kind of the way that manifests and should look is that you, as a product marketer, are so entrenched in this subculture that you feel like you have a mastery over the vernacular and like what's going on, and you can create jokes and memes and posts and all the kind of thing that you know is going to resonate because you like become it. I hope I'm not being like too pie in the sky here, but like that's really, really important. And again, Liquid crushes it on this. A lot of other brands do as well. The brands that I see suffer platforms and culture as like a to-do list. Like, oh, I'm going to get my 21-year-old niece to intern and like run our social media. And it's like, no, you have to like literally live in there and be thinking about that almost obsessively. And it's a grind. It's an absolute grind. But that's where AI can make the grind hopefully a little bit less.
Now, is that applicable to enterprise SaaS, or even like you were working with a university, right? How does it apply across the board? How do you think
100%.
about that?
I think 100%. I think there's different levels of difficulty, but the way that I would think about it is approach your marketing less as a sales motion and more about an impression motion. And what I mean by that is a lot of brands will just promote their product, promote their service, and no one wants to follow along for that. They don't care. They want to be entertained. They want to learn something. They want to feel something. And so it's helpful not to be so literal with how you approach your content strategy. Like, we're a university, so we need to promote our curriculum, or we need to talk about things that directly relate to what we do, how we operate, talk about our team, things like that. I think it's better to just get a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, find the boundary of where it makes sense for you as a brand to kind of talk and what themes to play off of. But it doesn't need to be so literal to your product. Because again, you're just trying to gain attention, and that attention the more scale you have, it will convert into actual product awareness, and then hopefully sales conversion. Can I just say one other thing too? This is a helpful framework pre-AI, and it is even more important actually today, which is that I would think more about long-form content. If I'm a founder, I would think more about long-form content that then can be synthesized down, in like a waterfall to shorter and shorter form. We're seeing a lot of growth in YouTube, long-form YouTube. More and more people are watching YouTube on their TVs. They're watching podcasts, things like this. So vlogs, whatever this may look like for you, longer comedy sketches, whatever that looks like. I think there's this thought around this metric of like, I forget what people are kind of calling it, but it's like the amount of time per user, the amount of time you are being watched per user, right? So if you're creating like 10 to 15 second little clips, and someone's watching that, how much affinity are they creating towards you versus maybe someone that they're watching for 20, 30 minutes at a time? And so I think more about long form and then how that boils down into short form so we have more content going out across platforms. And I think that's really important. So I could get into more of that and how AI, I think, can help kind of propel that forward for people, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, like an interesting way to visualize it, even from a product standpoint, is think of your content like a product, right? With these specific funnels that you really have. These days, how people create, whether it's, we talk about the customer journey, UX, all that. There's a similar approach really even to content through the entire funnel that then drives to your longer form content, and the total amount spent, hours spent or minutes spent, and whatever the metric is, and then like increasing their affinity towards your brand, because now the more they consume, they're seeing more value from you instead of you just pitching value and then having that convert. What they even said, like there's almost a tipping point that it does require scale for them ultimately to convert downstream. If it's like way too little or too like scarce in a way, I can see that being
you need to cast a wide net. Yeah, you need to cast a wider net, like reach more people. It's a numbers game. Like it's all, at the end of the day, it's all a numbers game. If you reach 100 people, a small percentage of them will convert. You reach 100,000, a similar percentage, maybe, a little bit smaller will convert, but the total number in aggregate is a lot more, obviously. So That's what I meant by that. But I think you're bringing up such a great point about like the customer journey and thinking through like the stages of a potential customer and then an actualized customer and like what that looks like. Imagine that a potential customer is following along with you for months before they eventually convert. What type of things are you providing them? Whether it be content, whether it be lead magnets, whether it be resources, whatever it is, that's all marketing. Why are they following along? You know, I think that's the right way to think about it. Because people are going to have to, once they buy, they're going to have to come and buy again. You're going to have to convince them every day to come back to your product or service. So you better have something that is frictionless and free for them to consume that keeps you top of mind.
Yeah. And hence like some of the flywheels that you've been building even in Darkroom and now like in this AI era, all the new things that you guys, you are working on as well with Darkroom and otherwise. Could you talk about how you now think through AI now that we sort of set the stage as far as like what that future looks like, some of the tools, how you're repurposing like workflows, all the good stuff?
Well, I'm laughing because I hate to break it to people. I think that there's no like, I'm going to give you this huge system of AI that's going to just do this all for you.
Absolutely.
Right? We're not even close to that because, and it actually excites me because marketing, there are certain maybe forms of knowledge work or tasks or what have you that are more easily automated, whether it's like crunching numbers or what have you. But marketing is so fluid and nuanced and emotional, you know, that it's just really difficult for AI to latch onto it and be able to just do it, you know, like that. It doesn't just work. But
we're dealing with humans, we're unpredictable and we're constantly changing.
100%. That's why you have to be steeped in the culture. But anyway, there are some things that you can do to free up your own bandwidth and mind share to do everything that we just talked about, right? Because that's where you as a human want and need to place yourself, because that's where that's where your strengths really are. So the way I think about it, I'll start with like a general framework. We at Darkroom, we love to do quarterly business reviews with our clients. It just helps kind of draw a line in the sand, press pause at the end of a quarter, you know, and just be like, all right, how are we pacing? How are we performing? What do we need to shed and what do we need to add? And where do we want to be? And what things do we need to do in order to get there? And so I would do that. It doesn't have to be at the end of the quarter. It could be tomorrow. I would just pause and say, okay, let's zoom out and really figure out from a business perspective, what are the KPIs we need to hit in order to grow and to increase margin? And then kind of reverse engineer from there the things that you believe you need to invest in for the long term and the short term to actually hit those numbers. It becomes a game of inputs, right? So for example, if you're like, all right, we want to invest in YouTube long form. We want to build more of that affinity share with our customers. Long form is going to be a grind and it's going to take a lot of time. But in the long term, it's going to pay out dividends. Then on a more frequent kind of daily basis, we're going to drop these like snacks of content. And we want to be posting 2 to 3 times a day and just get a ton of shots on goal. If those are the two ends of the spectrum, there's a bunch of other things maybe in between there. And you can sort of outline, this is all pre-AI, by the way. You can outline, you know, who needs to own what are the most complex things, what are the more medium level tasks, and maybe that's something that your team can own. And then what are the inputs that ratchet up into all those things that are like easily automated. And that's what you delegate to AI. So I like to tell my team and tell our clients, like, just think of AI as your new intern associate level. And you need to figure out all of the tasks and projects that you're going to carry out over the next quarter. And then you're going to delegate them out. And AI is now a new layer that you're going to delegate to. And so, for example, some of those tasks that we've built workflows around, nothing groundbreaking, right? But it's serving the ultimate purpose of, you know, creating systems and making better content. So for example, you know, we'll create scrapers for Reddit and TikTok and Amazon reviews and things like that to just pull in customer posts, you know, posts and language that customers are writing online, and pull that into a huge database and then run an LLM on top of that to say, okay, you are now this customer. You are this persona. This is how you think. this is the general sentiment. Now talk to me and tell me how we should reposition or where we should strengthen or what we should change about our product or, how you would like to be sold to, things like that. So AI is really good at aggregating and parsing large swaths of information and then surfacing that to you. So we'll do that. We'll do things like, I have a prompt that I can share with the group. It's very simple to implement. But basically what it is it's a persona for a world-class product marketing strategist. And the goal is to basically run like a Socratic-like audit of our product positioning. So we'll say, here's your entire persona. This is what you care about. This is what you're going to do for me. Now let's begin a session where you're going to pepper me with questions and really help me dig deep into why we are different and better than the competition in certain areas and maybe what I need to refocus on. And that's a lot of the work that I would do with clients 5-7 years ago is just run those type of interviews. That's a great way to leverage AI and save hundreds of dollars on consulting fees. So those are just a few examples, but yeah, the point is I kind of treat it like two buckets. One is like the junior associate level, and the other is like a board of advisors. You have the more senior, like heady type of tasks that you can do, and then you have the stuff that could just be automated. It's very like rinse and repeat. And then you sit right in the middle and execute on the tasks that require the most complex judgment and execution.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And also, it's good to hear from you that there truly isn't a prescriptive, just easy shortcut that you still have to really do the work. It's just understanding how to wrestle your language model, how you actually get it to do what you need to do, and make better, more strategic decisions. From it.
Yeah. But that being said, I will share with you, and you can share this with the group. There are three. I don't know, tips or exercises or things that they can actually implement. So the first is that product marketing prompt that I mentioned. That's a really helpful exercise, and I would do that at least every 3 months. So I'll send that. The second thing is I use Gumloop and N8N. These are two basically like Zapier alternatives that have AI built in, and Zapier works as well. But I'll say, okay, I want this information or this spreadsheet populated for me every Monday with this content, right? And it'll just run that, and I can run an AI analysis on top of it to summarize it, so I'm not looking through a huge database of information. So there's workflows like that are really helpful. And then the third thing is I have been using deep research every day, many times a day, and I think the future of the AI stack looks something like we wake up and delegate 3 to 5 pretty heavy tasks or research tasks to a model, and it goes and performs that research over 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and then we come back at lunch and kind of debrief on that. And then we do the same thing at the end of the day, and when we wake up in the morning, we review that research. So what I would advise everyone to do is every day get in the habit before you kind of clock out at 5, 6, 7 p.m., whatever, just initiate 2 to 3 deep research tasks about anything that you really want to know. It could be about your market trends. It could be about pricing shifts. It could be about tariffs, anything. And then just let it run, and then just check those things in the morning. And just get in that habit. I found that to be extremely helpful, and I've learned a ton. And anyway, I could go longer on that, but I'll cut it short there. I think those are 3 things that I can send you after the call.
Sounds good. That's great. Someone's asking, so we're kind of in question mode. Nick is asking if you could drop some of those names in the chat. Some of those names as far as the platforms, yeah. We definitely share that with you, Nick, as well. It's Claude, it's N8N, right? And Gumloop.
So there's Gumloop. Gumloop is great because it's more user friendly. And Nick, by the way, what we're doing here in these platforms is, if you've ever used Zapier, it's the same idea. You're taking there's a list of nodes that you can take. So for example, a node might be Reddit scraper. Actually, can I just show?
Yeah, go ahead.
Something? Okay, here we go. There is going to be an infinite loop for a second. Okay, so here's a really, really simple Gumloop automation that I made. And I can try to send this as a template as well, because it's like you just have to edit a few things and you're ready to go. So we have a client called Bareface Skincare. And I set up this Reddit scraper node. It pulls keywords from this subreddit called skincare addiction, where people are just absolutely candid about different products and tips and tricks and things like that. And then it basically just uses AI to categorize comments that directly reference Barefaced the brand and run kind of like a summary on top of that. So it'll pull out key phrases, it'll tell me about how we can utilize those comments for product strategy, marketing strategy, etc. And then what it does is it sends to a Google Sheet spreadsheet that I have, and it pings me in Slack. And so I get this like report in Slack that's like, here are 10 things that people talked about that we could turn into like video hooks, for example. And that's just super helpful. Like when I'm doing 1,000,001 things, I just need like a ton of ideas that otherwise I would have had to go to TikTok or go to YouTube or go to Reddit and search and mine for myself. They're right there, ready to go. And then I have now, something to start brainstorming off of. So that's just an example of what this looks like. And I can try to send this link around. I really recommend Gumloop. N8N, and the number 8N is another one, but it's definitely more for like technical folks, but it is powerful. Then obviously ChatGPT projects or Claude projects. You just upload instructions, upload files in there, and then chat with the LLM with that context. I use that all the time. People probably know what that is. So,
yeah, if you guys even want to go further, taking a replit and basically building an agent that could have an interface for you guys to do that on an ongoing basis as well. So let me check. Yeah, thank you for that answer. Let's see if there's any other questions. I do have one prop for you. There's been a lot of discussion around, well, first of all, context is you work with lots of different founders at different stages now, some earlier stages, some later stages. Interesting and because you have so much, so many opportunities to interface with these founders, we've all heard people talking about how AI could be replacing like people or certain things. Is it so much that AI is replacing, or is it that you're seeing that founders or like even more like traditionally technical founders perhaps being replaced or overrun by founders who truly leverage AI? So like founders who don't perhaps like really leverage AI versus founders who are now what we call the 10x AI founder. What's your take on what the future looks like as far as that goes?
Mm-hmm. I think it's happening slowly and then will happen all at once. What I mean by that is today, no one is getting replaced by AI. I mean, unless you're doing something extremely robotic, which is a small percentage of the people, at least that I interact with on a daily basis. But that being said, it is kind of cliche, but it's absolutely true. Like just using AI every day, multiple times a day, just the sheer act of doing that, by virtue of doing that, you will be ahead of the bottom 99% of people that use technology. It's insane to me the amount of people I talk to in my personal life that don't even really know what Claude is, So there's just a lot of alpha to be had. But when I say it's going to happen all at once, what I mean is that these tools are getting better and better at an astonishing rate. And essentially, like, the way I think about it is if you know how to use these tools and bend them to your will, then the better and better they get, you just become exponentially better. And I think there will be a huge divide very soon in the next 5 years between the people that have been using these tools every day and really understand them and are fully integrated, and then people who are just trying to catch up. It's going to be like the former folks are just going to go like supersonic. So yeah, that's what I'll say. I think just be using it. I found it to be super helpful. That being said, though, let me just balance that with what we talked about in the beginning, which is AI definitely cannot replace the most important aspects of your work. And more content will become commoditized. It will be AI slop, and so the bar that audiences have will go up. And what I found is I can almost treat AI like a crutch too often. Like where I'm just like, I'm not sitting with my thoughts and brainstorming by myself to come up with truly novel ideas. I just go right to AI sometimes. So I actually am starting to try to detach from that a little bit and know where I can use AI and where I need to push myself a bit.
So with that said, what are some tips, perhaps even weekly rituals that you are deploying to keep your mind sharp from like really more of the human perspective, like moving forward, that is important to you?
Yeah.
Decision making, focus, all that. Yeah.
So, couple things. Some of these are like super obvious and basic, and some of them are, I think, underrated. The obvious ones are, I go for long walks, and I don't have a podcast in, I don't have music in, and I kind of just talk to myself internally about, what is really important in the business and where I need to kind of reframe and refocus. You should be doing that anyway, all the time. So that's easy. The other things I do are, like I said, one is like actually go on platform and observe, click into comments, click into sub threads, like go watch what is happening and listen inside of your community, your industry vertical. Go understand your customers. Don't outsource that completely to AI. I think this like Reddit scraper that I showed is like helpful to just kind of pull in ideas and aggregate them. But like you should also actually go on Reddit and use these platforms and actually be a participant, because it's going to give you such a more authentic feel for how to create content. And then the third and fourth things are like go engage with like offline or very human sources of inspiration. Like I love watching comedians because it like reminds me not to take everything so seriously, and they're pulling from the cultural zeitgeist, and I can bring that back to my work and how I copyright or how I brief a new video for a client, or things like that are really going to resonate with like your everyday person. I'll go to museums, I'll go to gardens, like go engage with the real world and be a human and pull that into your work and push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Just to summarize this, right? AI is great for that like bottom layer of stuff that just has to get done to keep the lights on, but it should just be on autopilot to a certain extent. And you should use that time back to really think bigger picture and push on whatever it is, product design, marketing, strategy, what have you. Now is the time to like up level and not just sort of do everything status quo and then focus on all this automation. But it's like set the automation and then put that time back into thinking bigger. So yeah, I'll do those things, and those have helped me immensely.
Final question. What excites you about the future are you building within the context of AI right now?
Yeah, what excites me is there's so much room in the application layer for AI. I think ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, they've done an incredible job making AI super accessible and intuitive. And I think there's a lot more of that to be done by not just the big companies. So, shameless plug, what I'm working on is a way to speak these workflows for consumer marketing in particular into existence with just natural language, just plain English. Because no one, at the end of the day, wants to, some people do, but very few people want to actually build these like modular workflows like I presented my screen with. It's confusing, it's time intensive, it requires maintenance, yada, yada, yada. So I'm trying to build an application that allows you to do that seamlessly and without friction. And so I'm just really excited about the integration and seamlessness that we can have with AI, where we'll be talking to it more with our voices. It will be more embedded into the context of our lives. So it will understand the meeting that we just had and the Slack conversation we just had and what's going on our marketing platforms and our sales channels, and it'll just have more context and be able to help us and push things forward. So I'm just really excited about that future. I think it's going to be awesome because we'll be able to have 1-person, 2-person, 3-person companies that are highly profitable, and not like a complete battle and fight every day just to eke some money out of. So yeah. So yeah. I'll share some more about what I'm working on as well. And if anyone's interested, I'll give you my email and we can chat about workflows. We can chat about what I'm working on. I'm happy to give advice on the content side of things, anything. My door is always open.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Jackson. That's all the time we have. And I will make sure to follow up with you with any additional resources, links, and everything. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Darius. Always a pleasure, man.